Well, we are very excited to have the man coming to us live from the Bahamas. Every time
Imagine
I
that.
see you, I'm a little bit more jealous of you. Just vacation? What are you doing?
You know what? I've had a house here at Baker's Bay. It's in the Abacos for the last 7 years. I've had the land for a long time and then built a great house. So it's 30 minutes from Miami. It feels like I'm a continent away though, which is kind of amazing. So just to pop over here for the weekend is pretty perfect way to spend my last weekend not on the road here for Fox. And I know both of us have a pretty busy schedule coming up, but this is a great way to start the season with our bye week, basically.
Yeah, it almost feels silly sometimes doing an introduction of you, 7-time Super Bowl champion, all the different things that go into your life. But the one that as I was reading through some of this stuff, I forgot that you were drafted by the Expos. I mean, pretty high, right? Like in the 18th round, something like that. And I was going, God, I wonder what position I could see him, maybe in first base, outfield, pitching. Catcher never crossed my mind. I mean, this
Yeah.
guy that was on the scouting report said you could have been a potential all-star catcher. How the hell does Tom Brady, with all that you have and that all that you are, end up catching? Nobody wants to catch.
Oh, well, I loved it. But one funny story about the introduction, and people say, "Oh, 7-time Super Bowl champ Tom Brady." One of my really good friends, Mike Rapoli, who's co-founder of Noble, this apparel business that I'm involved in, always introduced me as this. You ever met my friend Tom Brady, 3-time Super Bowl loser? And in some ways, I kind of prefer that. So, in terms of playing baseball, obviously through high school, I went to a great high school called the Unipro Serra High School. It's in San Mateo, California. And Barry Bonds went to my high school. It was very much a baseball school. And I was actually pretty good at baseball all the way through, my little league career, through Babe Ruth, and then into high school. And I really wanted to stop playing baseball because it hurt my arm too bad and hurt my knees too bad from playing catcher all the time. So I choose a football career because baseball is too rough on my body, if you can imagine that. And obviously ended up falling in love with football, but I think I made the right choice when it's all said and done.
I would say that's probably true. But what led you? Like you had to be able to pitch. Why weren't you a pitcher?
I pitched a little bit, but pitchers are head cases. I didn't want to be a head case. I wanted to be behind the plate, calling pitches. I didn't want to be a rotational player. I loved hitting, and pitching was fun. But I was actually more suited to be a catcher, and I love that position. And my dad actually was a great baseball player. He got drafted to play professional baseball, and growing up in the Bay Area to root for the Giants, which was
Hard.
Barry Bonds at
Yeah.
that time was unbelievable. And then to cheer for the 49ers, I would say it was a pretty great time growing up in the Bay Area.
Unbelievable. Now you're a
Yeah.
broadcaster. Go figure. Out of all the success that you've had in life, and now you've made the fateful choice of going behind the microphone and doing it. We talked a lot last year before your first
Yeah.
season, and you questioned every broadcaster on earth. Everybody I talked to, I said, "You've been talking to Tom? Yeah, you talking to Tom? Yeah, yeah. Everybody's talking to Tom." But you really did just like you did as a player, right? You put your head down, you studied what you had to do to become the broadcaster that you are. But what didn't you know, right? I mean, you had an
Yeah.
idea, like you've met all of us, you had talked to all the broadcasters, but 1 year into it now, what didn't you know?
Well, first of all, I just want to say to you, I appreciate all the time and energy and support you put into helping me prepare. And you always took every phone call. And I was able to come see you on a Sunday night football game in Miami one night. And you kind of showed me everything that you work with and how you prepared. And, that's, a great way for me to always, think about the people that helped me get there and you in this different form of my life. And I started a different chapter and really ended my playing career. I finished my playing career and then moved on to something that I couldn't have imagined how would have been as exciting for me as it's been. And I joined an incredible team, first of all, but I went in there with some knowledge of how to do it because of the people that I was able to call and really lean on. You were one of those people. So I'm very grateful. And in regards to your question, there was a lot that I didn't know. And as much as you want to prepare for the season like I did, and making notes and trying to go through rehearsal games with my partner Kevin in a closet in Fox Studios, there's nothing like being live on television. And I'm telling you, there's a lot of mechanics to it. There's a lot of things that are happening in the moment. And a lot like as a player, you don't get a second chance. You know, you work really hard as a quarterback to study all week, to learn your plays, to know your opponent, to know your team, to know your situation. And then you get one chance to go out there and make it happen. And you know what, even as a quarterback, I messed up a lot. I threw a lot of interceptions. You know, I made the wrong decisions. And that is very similar to being a broadcaster. And you know what, it's never going to be perfect. You've got to go out there and give your best. And I've kind of, there's no way, and as you told me, there's no way for us to really measure how well we've done because there's no scoreboard. But, you know, sometimes walking away from the game and saying, you know what, I know it wasn't my best. It didn't feel my best, but I actually am proud of the effort that I put into the week. You know, there's little things to gain and to be gained from every time you step up there in the booth, not step out on the field, but step up there in the booth.
It is crazy, and the speed and the mechanics of communicating between trying to listen to the play-by-play, trying to communicate to the truck what you saw and what you want to see on replay, and at the same time, they may have seen something that they're desperate to get on, and
Sure.
It all takes place in like 10 seconds, and then the next play starts. So I can remember the first time that I did it and just going, I mean, just you felt like your brain was just spinning in a circle trying to keep up with the game that you had watched all your life.
I know, and and then you've got to verbalize it, and that's the challenge. That because so much of what I knew as quarterback and seeing the field is a lot of things are happening, but it's not a nonverbal communication. When there's 70,000 people screaming, you're only inside of your own brain, and you're letting your body do all the action. You're looking at your teammates and reading the chemistry you have with your receivers. But now all of a sudden you go on air, and it's 3 hours of, you know, spewing information out of your mouth. And you know, we have a joke, you know, nobody should be allowed on air for 3 hours live. I don't care who you are.
No, the president of the United States doesn't get to talk for 3 hours live. And we're totally dangerous when we get that opportunity. It is. And I literally almost begged you to take the studio job. I was like, Tom, you're a good looking guy. You're sitting there. I've seen you with Edelman and Gronk and the guys, and you guys are cutting up and having a good time. I go, that's fun. This is work. When you do the games, like you got to be responsible for the third string tackle, and you got to know everything, right? This is a job.
Yeah. And I think the thing that's helped me in that sense was I put a lot of work into playing quarterback too. And a lot of the studying that I was very fortunate to be really ingrained with in the teams that I was involved in was this maniacal focus on an opponent. So, and part of it, I actually really enjoy that part. I enjoy the film study. I enjoy there's a lot of, as you and I have talked about, data analytics that come into play, and a lot of phone calls we have. And there's a lot of information that you get. A lot of it you can't even apply to the telecast. But I think for me, trying this last off season to try to really hone in on becoming way more efficient with my preparation. And I think that's probably going to be the biggest difference for me going into year two is I kind of know more of what I need. I would say I'm far from being a finished product in this role. And I mean, you're tremendous in everything that you do every week. You're so prepared. You're so focused. You're so disciplined in everything you do. And I think you do an amazing job every time out. And I think for me, now that I can really understand the mechanics of broadcasting, you know, now I hopefully can get a little better with the content and all the information. And there's nothing that I haven't seen yet, you know, that I haven't seen yet as a broadcaster that I, you know, did see as a player. I've seen it, all of it. Now I just have to communicate it in the best possible way for the audience, and really a fun, entertaining way, because that's what it's all about. It's a great broadcast. It's a great opportunity for families to sit down, watch a game, and now you get to be sitting in the living room with them, explaining it from your point of view. So I've really enjoyed that.
Yeah, you talked about data analytics. I know you got to work with Seth Galina from PFF, and did he make you totally crazy or just partially?
They do a great job, and they've got a great team. And Seth is always on it. There's nothing that he doesn't have really a firm grasp of. And I like that he's equally as curious. I felt like a lot of the calls we get on last year in preparation for each game, I was learning a lot, and hopefully I was providing them some information back that can help them with some of their study too. Because everybody sees film study a little bit different as well. And the challenge in football is there's so many things happening at once. How do we really identify the root of the problem? And I think that's the challenge. You can look at, let's say, a blitzing linebacker and he comes clean. Well, sometimes it's the quarterback's responsibility to throw the ball before he blitzes. Sometimes the offensive linemen don't identify it properly. Sometimes that's a free blitzer by the quarterback's communication. Sometimes it's a free blitzer by the line's communication. We don't have all that knowledge, and you don't hear how the coach has taught these players how to be prepared for that particular blitz. So a little bit is guessing on our part. We have to use our own experience and knowledge of that, but there's just so many nuances to this sport, which is really fascinating from our standpoint to cover.
So it's always hard doing the broadcast, right? But now they tied both hands behind your back because you're a part owner of the Raiders. And so all these teams, and paranoia runs amok in the National Football League, all these teams were convinced you were going to get the secret sauce to their team and be able to advantage the Raiders with this whole thing. Now they've lightened it up a little bit. Tell us that story.
I would listen to press conferences all week anyway. There's whether it's the weekly, coaches press conference that he has to do on a Wednesday or Friday, I'd listen to that. The players all speak to the media. So it's not like you're forcing players to answer a question. I've always felt like if I ask a question and they don't want to answer it, I have no problem. The only thing I want to do is gain insight into the game to help the viewers understand the game a little bit better. And I think, Chris, the important part that and I'm sure you feel the same way, you want a great game. You want both teams to perform very well. I don't want to be on a broadcast and be negative about people. I want to showcase the great parts about every organization because I love the NFL. I love the sport. And if I can communicate that in a positive way to the viewer, great. And we're on live television. I'm not going to lie about anything I'm seeing to the audience. That's the audience that I'm trying to be, as raw and as unfiltered with as possible. So I think me asking questions in a production meeting is no different than a media member asking a question in a weekly press conference. They're going to answer it the same way. So, it's nice for my crew to have me involved because I think as a cohesive unit, what we're trying to do, that's going to be a real positive. But outside of that, I just want to go in there and be as professional as possible. And I am a professional. I was a professional as I played. I'm a professional in this role. And ultimately, I want to be as prepared as I can be so the broadcast for our viewers is the best as possible.
So tell me about this year's version of the Raiders. This is getting a little bit interesting now. Pete Carroll, Geno Smith, Ashton Genty, Brock Bowers. There's a few headlines here with this team now.
Yeah, well, there's definitely some good players, and I think they've proven, through the offseason, there's a big commitment that those players have made, and I think Pete's really done a tremendous job, like a lot of coaches with veteran experience are able to do. They run a real program. Nothing really surprises them. I mean, Pete has had a tremendous record of success when he was at Seattle, obviously when he was at USC. He's a tremendous coach and leader. And look, they're in a division where you've got Andy Reid, who's very much the same. Jim Harbaugh has done an incredible job. Sean Payton, we all know the kind of coach he is. So I think the Raiders having a figurehead like that at that position gives them a great chance to compete. So it's going to be an exciting division. I think it's, one of the top two divisions in football right now. And I think with the Micah Parsons trade, that was, the NFC North kind of just catapults itself back up into that conversation as well.
I don't know how much of the Dallas Cowboys documentary you've watched. I've watched it all. I literally couldn't sleep until I watched the next episode sometimes with that show. It is crazy to go back and relive all of that between Jerry and Jimmy back in the days when they were winning everything, and who knows how many they could have won. Have you seen it? And what was your reaction when you watched it?
So I've seen definitely parts of it. I've seen a few episodes in travel and stuff. I've been on a lot of airplanes, but I think it's always fascinating to see behind it. I kind of watch it not as a fan, but what can I learn from it? And I'm sure you probably do a lot of the same. Although a lot of those years, I mean, you have great knowledge and information because, you were probably a little older than I was when they were all going through that. I was following as a teenager, so I wasn't quite as ingrained as all the personalities. Jimmy, getting to know him the last few years from my role at Fox, I mean, I've learned so much about that organization from his standpoint, but then also we've covered the Cowboys a lot last year. So I had 4 or 5 cracks at really understanding that organization. And it's a very unique organization. They're truly one of one in the NFL in the way in terms of how they do business. And that was on display again this week with the Micah Parsons trade. Jerry has his own way of doing things. He's been a maverick, so to speak. He's not afraid to make very bold choices, very bold decisions. And, he's the leader of that organization. He sets the tone in everything that he does and says. And he's created tremendous value for the organization. And at the same time, they haven't had the on-field success in quite a long time. And I don't know how many of those things go hand in hand. I think someone like Troy Aikman, who's lived on both sides of that, can speak to all the nuances of that. We kind of see it from a little bit of a different perspective. But I think the NFL is better when the Cowboys are in the playoffs. They have a huge following, and they've got to find a way back there. It's maybe a bit more of a challenging way now without one of the best defensive players in the league right now.
I was stunned, and then the more I started thinking about it, the more I started thinking, Jerry just likes the action, right? He wants. Think about this, Tom. If he signs Micah Parsons for $44 million or whatever the number was, he's locked up at that point, right? Now he's got 3 of the highest paid players at their position, and there's no maneuverability. The one time that they've won a championship was back in the Herschel Walker day, and they had 5 chips out there that they could play with. Now he has money. Now he has the ability to trade. We don't, Dak's on a 3-year contract at this point in his career. Would they begin to look, because this quarterback class is pretty good looking going into next season? He's in play. Jerry Jones, the GM, is in play in a way he wouldn't have been if he didn't do this.
There's certainly a lot of flexibility with what they have in their choices beyond this season, for sure. And I think you do when you make these long-term commitments like they did to CD and like they have the Dak and like they could have done with Micah. You're right. There's less flexibility. And now those guys have to go perform to the value of their contract if they want to continue to have the kind of season like they did a few years ago. But last year was a big disappointment for the organization. And there's different ways to do business, and I think Jerry again has his own way. And both, it's interesting, and he referenced this, there's an owner role and there's a general manager role. And he's clearly makes the personnel decisions, and he's also got to be the owner, and it's just 2 different jobs. And he doesn't mince words with how he feels about either of those roles. So you can't deny the organizational success from a branding standpoint, from a value creation standpoint, for the NFL in general. I mean, you just look in the offseason, it's a lot of NFL talk. It's a lot of Cowboys talk. And that's all very positive for the Cowboy organization. So they need to then transfer it to on-field success, which is, for me, I was a part of an organization that at the Patriots, things were done very differently than the way the Cowboys did it. And we had a lot of on-field success, and it created, I think, an enterprise value for, Mr. Kraft over time. But we did everything we could to minimize distractions. We didn't talk about contracts. We didn't have many people, hold out and make, big deals of it. We just tried to focus on what we had to take care of in our business. I had to worry about what was in my control. And Bill did a good job every day coming and saying, you heard this a million times, do your job. And we just got so brainwashed in a positive way that's how we saw ourselves. We went in there. I didn't have to be general manager. I didn't have to be owner. I didn't have to play right tackle. I just had to play quarterback. And when I could do that, that's why I wanted to do it, because I needed my receivers just play receiver. I don't need your opinion on it. Just play receiver and play it really well. And I think we all built a lot of trust within that organization from an on-field standpoint, that if we did do our job, we could achieve the goal of what every team sets out at the beginning of the year. And even as good as we were, we didn't win it every year. We won it 6 times in 20 seasons. So, even at that, for as great as we were, less than a third of the time.
You know what's really interesting, and when you watch more of this documentary, you'll see is that there's natural conflict built into stars. There is, I mean, Bill Belichick was a star coach. You were the star quarterback. Robert Kraft was a star owner, right? And conflict comes out of the fact that the three of you had to make it work somehow, some way. Ultimately, at the end, it didn't, and you go to Tampa and win another Super Bowl. Can you talk about, because that is the ultimate power of any organization, those three positions, if you will. How hard is it to be a part of the whole, but also be able to get across what's important to you?
Well, I very much voiced my opinion, for quite a while when I was at the Patriots. And I think Coach Belichick and I always had an incredible working relationship. He loved me being the quarterback, and I loved him being the head coach. And there's nobody that I trusted more to make the right decisions as a head coach than Coach Belichick. And he was essentially the general manager as well. And I think that's where you can get, a bit of a conflict. And I would say there's inherent dysfunction in the way that the NFL is set up. You have an owner that would love for everybody to get along and for us to win all the time. And then you have a personnel side that is really focused on college, evaluations, drafting. And then you have coaches that are interested in coaching the players to be successful on the field at the NFL level. So when you're winning, it's fine. When you're losing, either the coach thinks we're not drafting the right players, or the people in personnel say we're not coaching them well enough. And that's the dysfunction. And that's why there's cinema every single offseason, because there's only one team out of 32 that win it. So you have 31 organizations that are trying to figure out, do we have good enough players, or are we not coaching them well enough? And that's where I think an owner can play a great role. That, he's got to arbitrate it and make it functional. And Mr. Kraft did a great job of that for a long period of time.
When you finally made the decision to go to Tampa, right?
Yeah.
With everything that happened to you in that organization, all the championships, everything that happened, can you describe the emotion of walking out of that building it probably was a little like when you came in, like, 6th round, are you friggin' kidding me? 6th round, I'm going to show you what, right? You probably felt a little bit of that same thing walking out of the building. I'll show you. Oh, you think I'm done? All right, let me go give you a little lesson here.
Sure. Well, in that, a lot of it, I had a choice to be a free agent. And when I had that last season, I put my house for sale in September. I knew that was my last year. And I finished.
Why did you know it was your last season?
Well, I knew that I wasn't going to come back to the team at the end of that year. I knew that was and I literally put my house for sale. And I knew that, there were a lot of conversations that I had, over the previous couple years, that I knew it was time for me to continue my football journey somewhere else. And it was nobody to blame. There was no animosity. In fact, it was very emotional leaving, because it's kind of like telling, your dad, I'm going away to college somewhere else. I'm leaving to go on a different journey. And it was just the right moment for me. And I ended up picking an organization that I felt could really use me. And I really evaluated the rosters. I evaluated the coaches. I evaluated the weather conditions, the climate, the practice climate, the facilities. I had a value associated with everything that I valued as a player at that time. And I made a decision to go to Tampa because I thought that would give me the best opportunity to love what I was doing again. And then if I really loved what I was doing, I could be the best version of myself for that club. And Tampa embraced me. Um, it was really an unbelievable 3 years for me. And I can't thank Joel Glazer, Brian Glazer, who I was really close with, Jason Light, who I love, Bruce Arians, who I love, Todd Bowles became the head coach, Byron Leftwich, who I love, all the players there. My football journey would never have been complete had I not had that experience in Tampa. And that doesn't take away from 20 amazing seasons with the Patriots. I have memories for life. And my kids were born in Boston. Those victory parades will never go away. But sometimes in life, a chapter closes and then you've got to give your best to the next opportunity. And I was excited to do that in Tampa. And, we went out there and we gave them hell for a few years. And I had the best time doing it. And then I got a little, at 45, I knew that was going to be my last year too. So
good golly.
Yeah.
How long did it take them in Tampa? I mean, clearly they had to buy into you leading, changing the direction. Arians had been a coach for a long time, but even he had to adjust, right? How long do you think it took for that team to become the team that you wanted it to be?
I think we battled through about halfway through the season. I would say in just a normal course of a season, you really don't know what type of team you are until right around Thanksgiving, because every team starts the year with free agency, draft picks, but every team feels like we're going to be way better. How many teams right now, 1 week before the season, think we've done everything to improve? All 32 teams are hopeful that they're going to be better this year than last year. And the reality is 5 games into the season, there's half of the fan bases in the league are going to be like, we suck. We can't get anything right. That is 6 weeks from today. You're going to have half the fan bases in the NFL thinking about 2026 season. So you don't really figure out what team you are, because I believe the processes that you need to have to be successful are more important than the outcomes every given weekend. And if you have really good processes in place for improvement and development and coaching and strategy and recovery and practice, all those things that you saw, like in New England, we had, well, over the course of 16 weeks or 17 weeks, they play themselves out. And by about midway, some teams are getting better every week with their practice habits. Some teams get worse. And then those teams early in the season that had hope, well, now they don't even have hope. Now they realize we suck and we have no shot. And then they start going the opposite direction, and the fans quit, the players quit. And I think that's why you need, and a lot of teams are, I think, going this way. I've heard this several times over the course of the offseason and even last year. We're drafting people before we're drafting players, which means they're thinking about the intangible traits of these players more so than just the skill set. And I think I'm a big believer in that. I won Super Bowls with a lot of 6th-round picks, a lot of undrafted free agents that worked hard. They put the team first. They were committed to one another. They were committed to try to do the right thing on every play. They showed up every day with a good attitude to be successful. They weren't selfish. You had receivers that were going to go in and crack safeties. You had running backs that were going to step up in pass protection and take on blitzing linebackers. You were going to have a quarterback that could stand in the pocket and take a hit when someone's bearing down on their face mask. You had defensive linemen that were taking up 2 offensive linemen so a linebacker could scrape over the top and make a tackle. So that is team football. And those are good processes for winning and for championship level type of commitment. And you don't get that all the time in the NFL. I think the challenge in this day is we're getting a lot of athletes that are very concerned about individual success, very concerned about their individual statistics. And it's fine. You'll probably make a lot of money that way, but I don't think you're going to be a champion in the same way, because champions do what the stars aren't always willing to do. And I would prefer to be on a team full of champions over stars. In fact, when I was on a team full of champions, the James Whites, the Kevin Falks, the Edelmans, the Welkers, the Hightowers, the Jamie Collins, the Logan Ryans, the Troy Browns, we kicked all the stars' asses because we played together as a team. Because football is the ultimate team sport. And even in this broadcasting role, Chris, that's what I look for all the time. When a quarterback throws a touchdown pass, I actually watch to see who he goes and celebrates with. Because what did I do? I looked for my offensive lineman every time. I went down and celebrated in the end zone with my teammates every time. I wanted everyone to feel like they were part of the success. I told the linemen, we're all running to the end zone and we're celebrating as a team. Because I think that's way more intimidating than a quarterback doing his 6-shooter guns and pointing up in the crowd and doing all that other bullshit that's very self-promotional, but it's not about winning. And I think winning in football is about a team, always a team attitude first.
So tell me how, based on what you just said, how does it go this year for the Dallas Cowboys without Micah Parsons? How does it go for the Green Bay Packers with him? Because now they've got a very high-priced star player, pressures on Jordan Love to deliver. Like, what do you think? What's the end of this chapter at the end of this season?
It's intriguing. I wish I was, like Tony Romo, who calls out all the plays and knows everything in advance. And I would say it's unpredictable, but usually I see free players, and maybe it's in Micah's role, that goes to his new team. And in your first year, everyone's on their best behavior. Everyone is aligned with the team goals. And then, I believe Mike always has been that. I love Mike. I've been a friend of his since, his rookie game was against me. I've always loved his skill set as a player. And he's going to have to adapt and morph his way into a system that has a lot of other good players as well. And I think the challenge with being a really high-paid player, whether that's a receiver or a defensive end, is if you get paid a lot and you're not racking up those statistics, well, there's a lot of social media and media pressure that falls on you. And you have to be a very strong-willed competitor to say, look, the goal is winning, the team winning, not me getting, a sack a game, or me as a receiver going for, 110 yards a game. You have to be okay with the team success. Put the contract aside. Are we winning or are we losing? Is our side of the ball having the success that we expect? Obviously, Green Bay, with making this move, they believe this is the move that puts them in contention to win a Super Bowl.
Yeah. So the quarterback position changes. You're a different guy than Mike Vick was, right?
Yeah.
Are we seeing an evolution at that position, or is it still the best way to beat somebody to stand in a pocket, have 53 yards of width, 60 yards of depth, and all that square footage in between? Because Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, the guys that are the MVPs now, that are winning Super Bowls, are bringing this mobile element into the game? Or is it just the game is changing with what the quarterbacks know how to do, reading defenses and making plays from the pocket?
Okay, this is a 3-hour podcast on this question alone. in literally how we break this down. This is and I feel very strongly about this too. I don't believe the quarterback position is mentally as developed as it was when I entered the league 25 years ago. There was a premium on understanding defenses, on understanding matchups, on, I'd say, pre-snap reads, getting your team in and out of the right play. And I felt the way that I learned to play the position over a period of time will lead and will continue to lead. You'll give your team the best chance to win. To truly be a field general, like all the guys that we admired growing up, the John Elways, the Dan Marinos, the Joe Montanas, I think you better have a mental advantage on the field. And I think sometimes that's more important than the physical advantage. Now, did I wish I could run? Of course I wished I could have run. But because I couldn't run, I had to double down on those things much more than anybody else. I ran a 5.28 40 at the combine. So I knew that if the ball was in my hands, nothing good was going to happen. So I had to get that ball out of my hands so fast that the defensive line couldn't make an impact on the game. And I had to get it into my skill position players' hands so they could actually advance the ball down the field in order to put us in a position to score points. So I think what's happened is with the rule changes in the NFL that have essentially taken away forcible contact to a ball carrier, certainly the quarterback, outside of the pocket, even though the quarterback can protect himself, we've now forced a very passive defense. So now the quarterback can run and basically unabated anywhere he wants on the field and has tremendous protection. So because of that, offensive coordinators now have those plays in their playbook and they're running them more than they've ever run them ever before. And it's forcing a smaller defensive player to try to track that player down. Do I think that's good for the longevity of a quarterback? I think it's terrible for the longevity of a quarterback. Do I think that it's exciting? It's certainly very exciting and it's fun to watch. But a beautiful drop back by a quarterback to rip a 12-yard outcut to the field, I think that's incredible. I know the level of difficulty. Sometimes you can do that when it's easy if the corner backs off. For a quarterback to run for 12 yards, it looks incredible. So I think some ways throwing the ball for a 20-yard gain is much easier than running for a 20-yard gain. But a 20-yard gain looks on the ground by a quarterback running looks incredible. So it's a nuanced question. You know, I would encourage all the quarterbacks to protect themselves still because, and I'm watching a lot of college football games today, if a quarterback falls on his right shoulder and tears his rotator cuff one time, that's the end of his career. And when you expose yourself to those type of hits, you're going to have a career that ends much sooner than you would have wanted. And I don't know when that's going to happen. I don't wish that upon anybody, but it is the reality of running the football. When you have the ball, it's the defense's player's job to get you on the ground. And you have to be cognizant. I think it's the responsibility of the offensive player to protect himself. The way the NFL rules are now, the defensive player has to protect the offensive player. And I strongly disagree with that form of refereeing the game.
You watch football today. I did too. We saw Arch Manning have a tough day, right? Playing against a very good defense, Matt Patricia's defense. And so he got to see some new looks, I'm sure. Did you see enough out of him? I mean, he was the next Tom Brady, the way he was getting built up here before the season started. But he also missed some really easy throws. I mean, ones that made a difference in the game. What did you think?
Yeah, definitely saw certainly the first play of the game. He's rolling out to the right and he has this receiver, it was the tight end wide open and kind of skips it to him. And, a lot of these guys they're so young and they don't, with social media and Twitter and you can, make someone look so great and you can tear them down so quick. And before it used to be, have to wait till the paper comes out the next day to make a real evaluation. But in the digital era, it happens in 5 seconds. So, I think there's a blessing and a curse in some of it. The curse is a lot of people pile on. The blessing is I don't believe a quarterback, there needs to be resilience built up in the quarterback as well. So even though he didn't have his best game today and they lost, if he uses this to his advantage, Arch, he's going to be tougher for it. And he's going to have a better next game because of it. And I always felt like, you've got to deal with a lot of adversity from a quarterback standpoint to toughen you up to be the true leader for the organization. And unfortunately, these kids now at 19 years old or 20, they're forced to be the leaders of a college organization. And it was probably more the head coach. But because now there's so many people moving every year in college, it's really thrust upon that quarterback position to do that. And, they're young in their development. So, there's a long season to play out. Arch has years beyond this to still play in college if he wants, but it's going to be up to him to see how deep he, really wants to, dig within himself and how deep he wants to dig in order to be successful. But there's nothing to show me that he won't be that. He's been that way, in high school and even last year. And he's got a lot of good people around him that know exactly what to do.
It's such an interesting position, and yet year after year now, and of course you beat Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts got him last year, but he's been the force in the AFC. MVPs Lamar Jackson, MVP Josh Allen, Joe Burrow got him once and actually went to the Super Bowl. But it has been the era of Patrick Mahomes here for a little while.
Yeah.
Why? Why him over those other guys? I mean, clearly those other guys have tremendous skills. Yeah. What has set him apart to win those games?
I think his performance and poise under pressure is tremendous. He's had two really tough Super Bowls. One was against us at the Bucs, and obviously one was against the Eagles, who had a tremendous defense. And doing that game last year, they really suffocated Patrick. He, in all the games that I've watched him play, he's just a tremendous field general. And he's got a great ability to, when the teammates get in the huddle with him, they have a belief in him that I think is greater than the belief that the other players have in their quarterbacks. And not to say that they don't have, Josh Allen, his teammates believe in him exponentially. Lamar, the same way. Joe Burrow, the same way. It's just Patrick has proven it now longer than those guys have that he performs his best in the biggest moments with the most on the line. And a lot of it, you can see it in their eyes, who wants to be in those moments. And Patrick wants to be in those moments. And yeah, those Super Bowl losses are very discouraging and they're tough. But again, Patrick needs to use that to his advantage going forward. You can't ever forget those. Those Super Bowl losses were the worst of my life. All three of them. I thought they were nightmares. I still think about them. They still bother me. If they come up on television, I turn the channel as fast as I can. I don't want to see it. I don't want to hear about Nick Foles. I don't want to hear about Eli Manning. That's just the way it is. And that's got to motivate him the rest of his career.
Yeah, they got him both times with the same way, with the pass rush and lack of protection and not on the offensive line. The other one that is so interesting going into this year, Aaron Rodgers. Probably the swan song, right? Who knows what could happen. But nobody would understand where he is in his 40s now better than you. And what do you think he has to do to have that great walk-off moment that you had?
It's a great question. And it's Aaron's proven that he's won a Super Bowl, many championship games. He's a winner. And I think what I've always appreciated about him, what everybody does, is his ability to throw a football and pass it. It's like in Aaron in his prime, to me, is the greatest passer of the football the league's ever seen. He could get the ball from point A to B faster and more accurate than any player, I think, in the history of the NFL. The ability, when you get older, you got to figure out other ways to succeed because you don't have the same 2011 version of Aaron Rodgers. And like Peyton Manning, when he threw 50 touchdowns and 49 touchdowns, then 55 touchdowns, or like I did in 2007. We all have to evolve and grow. And there's other ways to evolve and grow. Some of it's more mentally. How do we make the game a little bit more simple for ourselves so that we can execute faster? And then emotionally, how do we connect with our teammates and bring that competitive, positive attitude to work every day? And sometimes when you go through tough times like he did at the Jets, you get reinvigorated by going to another organization like the Steelers that has had so much consistency in their success. And that could allow Aaron, to achieve what he hopes, to go out on the highest of possible notes. So I get to cover them. I'm sure you get to cover them a little bit.
Yeah.
It'd be my first time covering Aaron from a broadcaster and sitting up in the booth. But I'm really excited to see what he does this year.
Yeah. A couple other really interesting storylines for me this year. One of them being Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams together. We've talked a little bit about Caleb and getting the ball out of his hands and that sort of thing. What do you think Ben Johnson has to do to make Caleb Williams work in the NFL?
And Ben, has obviously come on the last bunch of seasons, three seasons really. And with Jared and taking Jared, when they got him from the Rams, they thought they were getting a throwaway quarterback.
Clearly.
And Jared has turned into an MVP type candidate. And Ben has done an incredible job helping Jared succeed by catering the offense to the skill set of the quarterback, which is what, in the end, what every great coordinator should do. Now you go on to another number 1 overall pick in Caleb that has certainly a different physical style of play than Jared. And Ben is going to have to adapt that system to the strengths of Caleb. And I think when I saw Caleb play last year, when he was at his best, the ball came out of his hands quickly. He was very decisive. He was getting to his reads quickly. And I'm sure Ben is going to try to say, and he's looked at all the film as well, when Caleb holds the ball for a long time, it's not as good. He's got to drop back. He's got to evaluate the coverage. He's got to find the weak spot of the coverage, and you got to make an accurate throw. And I'm sure those things are being drilled by Ben day in and day out. It's, we all develop in different ways and at different times. For example, my development as a quarterback was more physical. I needed more physical development as I got to be a pro and into my playing career. Other players need more mental development, and you can gain that, as you go on to year 2, year 3, year 4. And I continued that all the way through the end of my career. Peyton did that all the way through the end of his career. So there's all these forms of development that need to take place. And when you get a great teacher like Ben Johnson, that's going to give Caleb the best opportunity to succeed.
And one more in this list, J.J. McCarthy, your guy, University of Michigan, right?
Yeah.
Did wonderful things there, as did you. So that's a tough spot, though. That team won a lot of games a season ago. And he set out the year, got hurt early, got to watch, got to see it all. Your thoughts on him?
And that's the obviously unknown aspect of this Vikings team. They return a lot of the same guys. They've had a little bit of transition for sure. Addison's out early. But Kevin O'Connell has done a great job, and certainly with Sam, last year, that was incredible what that Minnesota Vikings team did. Sam went on, Seattle got a great free agent contract. They had no problem letting Sam leave, and they just expected JJ to come in and be the guy that they drafted. I think it was 9th overall, something like that. So JJ, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. You guys fact check that, because I know the internet's going to, if we get that wrong, God forbid. The first round pick of JJ.
It's fine.
But they're expecting JJ to come and play at that level that Sam did. But I think that's a lot to ask a young player too. I mean, in my second year, I wasn't the same quarterback that I was in year 7 or year 8. I was way better in 2007 than when I was in 2001 when I took over. So these years of development, they all add up. And I think it's a bit unfair to create unrealistic expectations for a quarterback in his second year. But of course, Minnesota Vikings fans are going to have those expectations because of how high of a pick he is. So he's got a lot to prove. And Kevin's going to, again, similar to what Ben does, and I think Kevin does a great job of that, he's got to cater that offense to what JJ and what Kevin has seen JJ do consistently well over the course of this offseason and training camp. They cater that offense to the things he does well. And then you try to build a little bit every week and put a little more on JJ's plate.
They love him. I mean, even when he was hurt and he wasn't practicing and they were winning games and it looked like they were going to make a run in the playoffs, all they were talking about was JJ. I mean, I knew in week 3 there's no way they weren't going to make the switch afterwards. Yeah. So, I mean, and obviously we all watched him in college and he did a great job, but I mean, there is a passion there for him that is I really haven't seen. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, they have. And look, he won a national championship, Michigan. He had, when you beat Ohio State like they did, and they performed the way they did in those big moments against Washington, and there's a lot of reasons to like the poise and composure and certainly the physical ability. He's a really good passer of the football. He's got enough mobility to extend plays. He's a very grounded kid. So, I mean, look, I love JJ when he was playing for the Wolverines, got drafted high to Minnesota, and now he's got a chance to go prove himself. And it really doesn't matter what Tom Brady thinks or Cris Collinsworth or anybody from the Minneapolis Tribune. It matters what JJ thinks and what his teammates think of him. And I'm sure, every game's not going to be 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. And, he's just going to have this second year, which is in essence his rookie year because he didn't play at all, that it's going to be some fairy tale story. There's going to be a lot of ups and downs. And again, when you're in the NFL season, the one thing we do know is there's adversity every step of the way. There's losses, there's injuries, there's calls that don't go your way, there's matchups that don't go your way, and you've got to have a team with great leadership that's able to overcome whatever adversity you face. And that's why you're rewarded at the end of the year with, a trophy and a ring if you get it right.
The last question, did you and Peyton really go somewhere for 3 days and sit and talk ball and steal plays from each other?
We had the time of our life, and we had an off season. Look, I was about 10 years into the league. Peyton was more than that, 12 years in the league. And we thought that, look, all these tight end university and pass rusher summits, they're doing all those things now. And I think Peyton and I, we got together through, I think, just mutual respect and admiration to spend 3 days together to kind of nerd out on football as quarterbacks and to learn from each other. And it's hard to learn, you're always going back to the same meeting room with the same coaches. Well, if you really want to get better, you better approach other people who are great at what they do. And Peyton was the gold standard for quarterback. And, I had a lot of success. He had success. And we just kind of dropped our guard and said, hey, what are some of the ways you do it? What are some of the things that I do that you could use? And, I took 3 or 4 pages of notes. He did the same. And then we went our separate way. And it was never supposed to come out that we did it. And then Peyton started talking about it a few years ago. So, here we are. I was sworn to secrecy, of course, in the moment. But, he gave up the goods. So I don't know. The last time I'm telling him anything where he's got to, not tell anybody, I'm a little worried about Peyton spilling the beans on anything else.
Were you guys sort of mentally keeping score? Okay, like he gave me one, it's okay for me to give you something now, and then back and forth, and it's getting out of balance now. You need to give me something else here.
You know what? I think we were just trying to beat everybody else in the conference, and if it got to the 2 of us in the championship game, which it did a lot, look, all bets were off. But there was one play, and I always joke, a lot of teams actually call it Gronk pass. Peyton called it trap pass. Mm-hmm. And we'd pull the guard, and the tight end would get the linebackers to step up, and the tight end would go behind the linebackers and catch balls. And I would always joke, half of Gronk's, because Gronk's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer, half of Gronk's receiving yards came on that pass play. So Gronk, don't thank me, thank Peyton Manning for all that production. And he's responsible for you being on, because if it wasn't for those 3 days, Gronk might not be a Hall of Famer.
Trust me, Peyton will be there at the induction ceremony, and he'll tell Gronk. I've heard that story 20 times already, so that's great.
That's right.
You're a great friend. Thank you very much for taking time away from your final weekend off, and we all enjoy watching you play, broadcast, and all that you do, so thanks very much.
Thanks, Cris. You as well. I appreciate you, man. I look forward to always keeping in touch. And, if anything I can ever help with, I'm always here. So we love the NFL. I love the players. I love the organizations. It's so great to be able to cover it. And like I said, in this next chapter of my life, being someone that does the same thing as you, I'd say there's no greater responsibility to cover the game. And I take it like that, just like you do. And you're the ultimate professional in everything you do. And I hope to continue to head in that direction.
But it's a pretty good gig, isn't it?
Sure is. Hey, you don't get hit. I leave the game and I'm like, I feel pretty good. No high ankle sprains, no broken ribs. We'll call it a good day.
I don't know. If somebody has a bad PFF score and these 300-pounders walk towards me, that's all I'm thinking. What's his score, man? What's his score?
That's right. I can see that. I don't know how you deal with that. That's tough.
It is strange. Thank you, buddy.
Thanks, Cris. Great to be with you.